Speak, Chapter 2430, Seeking Passion Finger. Published by Divine Tao Library. Translator, Salavan and Ashish. Translation checker, Pew Pew Lasergun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dale Ligerkeys. It looked as if a starfield that had been shrunk countless times had appeared over everyone's head, an extremely mysterious sight to see. A mysterious and ever-changing aura could be felt coming from inside the starlight door, shocking all who laid eyes on it. Right then, beams of starlight suddenly shot down, falling on the dozen or so candidates and engulfing them. Immediately after, a dazzling flash of light blinded everyone's sight. By the time the dazzling flash dissipated, the dozen or so candidates surrounded by the starlight had disappeared. The same thing was happening all over the star boundary at this moment. Across the four great territories, thousands of Tao Source Realm cultivators were drawn into the shattered star sea. Meanwhile, on the grandstands in Ice Moon City, Feng Xuan coldly glared at Bing Yun before he stood up and left. Even as he departed, he didn't say anything. It was already meaningless to talk now. The juniors had entered the shattered star sea, and the marriage between Seeking Passion Sect and Ice Heart Valley could only be put on hold until Feng Shi and Ziyu had safely returned. But if either of them perished inside, he would have to give up on the marriage. Bing Yun had no intention of stopping him. She was not afraid of Feng Xuan since their strength and status were basically on par, but causing an incident here would not yield any benefits for either side. In the dark and cold void, bleak shattered cultivator stars and debris floated about everywhere. This entire space seemed devoid even of world energy, and starry skystorms blew everywhere, smashing everything in their path. A vast asteroid sea filled the sky, seemingly stretching out like an eternal river with no end. It was extremely quiet, as if this was before the beginning of the universe, the heavens and earth not yet formed from the empty chaos. Suddenly, a bright flash of light appeared somewhere, and by the time the flash disappeared, Yang Kai had strangely appeared. Before, while he was surrounded by the starlight on the ring, he had felt space principles fluctuating around him. He was quite familiar with this feeling and understood it was a sign of long-distance teleportation. Apparently, the reason why the star seals had become passes to enter the shattered star sea was that they allowed points in space to connect and execute long-distance teleportation. Without a star seal, one would not be able to teleport to the shattered star sea. The moment he appeared in the shattered star sea, a nostalgic look flashed across Yang Kai's eyes. Because he was quite familiar with the sight before him, it gave him the illusion that he had returned to the Heng Luo starfield. When he was in the Heng Luo starfield, he had also traveled to many cultivation stars, shuttling back and forth through the starfield many times, often seeing similar scenes. The only difference was that the scene before him seemed bleaker than Heng Luo starfield. Yang Kai even saw a giant shattered cultivation star. This cultivation star was at least 1 month away from his current location and seemed no smaller than Shadowed Star, but the left half of this cultivation star seemed to have been smashed by a terrifying impact. There were a lot of these shattered stars all around. Yang Kai was completely shaken by this. He couldn't tell how strong one must be to be able to do this kind of thing. But if anyone could do it, they must be a great emperor realm master. In the battle back then, many great emperors had besieged heaven, devouring great emperor. Could that battle have taken place in this starfield? Yang Kai suddenly had such a thought. If this wasn't the case, why else would there be shattered cultivation stars in this shattered star sea? In that case, this battle would have been a disaster for this starfield. Perhaps it was precisely because of that battle that this starfield became this desolate, leading to it being thrown into the void, only accessible at certain special moments. Thinking so, Yang Kai became gloomy all of a sudden. He could imagine what would happen if this battle had happened in Heng Luo starfield. If history was slightly different, then this barren wasteland could have very well been Heng Luo starfield. There would have been no Tong Xuan realm, no water moon star, and no shadowed star. There would have been just some shattered stars and ruins of the battlefield, which would never regain life. While he was immersed in his thoughts, he suddenly felt a strange energy fluctuation not too far behind him. Yang Kai promptly turned to look and saw a person appear about 1,000 meters from him. This figure, too, was looking around in a daze, just like Yang Kai. After seeing this person's face, a huge grin appeared on Yang Kai's face. Young sect master, we really share some fate. Who knows if it was because they were standing next to each other when the shattered star sea opened, but Feng Shi had actually appeared near him. However, the other rising stars of the Northern Territory were nowhere to be seen. Only the heavens would know where they had been teleported to. Previously, Yang Kai's assault had fallen short because of the phenomena caused by starseal, so naturally, Yang Kai was overjoyed to meet his enemy like this. While speaking, Yang Kai's figure was already pouncing straight towards Feng Shi. This was the Shattered Star Sea, and there were no spectators here, nor was there any Feng Xuan and Yao Zhu. Even if Feng Shi was killed here, no one would be the wiser, and Yang Kai wouldn't need to worry about triggering a war between Ice Heart Valley and Seeking Passion sect. How could Yang Kai miss such a good opportunity? As such, he used his full strength in this attack, preparing to kill Feng Shi with one blow. Feng Shi also regained his senses at this moment, but seeing Yang Kai coming straight at him, he didn't appear to be panicking at all. He had no intention of avoiding and instead stood in place and sneered, coldly glaring at Yang Kai. There was a path to the heavens, but you refused to take it, instead choosing to charge through the doors of hell. Saying so, he raised his hand and threw a bead towards Yang Kai. A terrifying might spread through the surroundings as Emperor pressure filled the void. Immediately, the starry sky shook endlessly. Emperor authority bead. Yang Kai's face immediately turned pale as he blurted out in shock. Bing Yun had warned Yang Kai about this possibility, so he had always been wary of Feng Shi having an Emperor authority bead up his sleeve. However, since Feng Shi hadn't taken it out earlier, Yang Kai had assumed this was not the case. But the facts were laid right before him, so Yang Kai couldn't help but become suspicious. Feng Shi really had the Emperor authority bead. Perhaps because he was afraid of getting beaten black and blue like he just was, when he saw Yang Kai again, he decisively summoned this Emperor authority bead. This Emperor authority bead contained the full-powered strike of a third-order Emperor Realm Master, so how could Yang Kai dare to take it head-on? After realizing that things weren't looking good for him, Yang Kai quickly turned around and retreated a couple thousand meters using space principles. Hong. A powerful pressure suddenly came bearing down on him as Fang Xuan's illusory phantom appeared in the desolate void. This phantom was incomparably huge, its head touching the sky as its feet stood on the ground. It was staring blankly at Yang Kai and suddenly pointed at him. A shout suddenly echoed across 100 kilometers, seeking Passion Finger. Just as it shouted, Yang Kai felt a dreadful aura fly towards his back. He promptly cried, "Dragon transformation." Immediately, Yang Kai's entire body was covered in dragon scales and his arms suddenly became like dragon claws. Yang Kai did not stop here, though, and also pushed his 5 elements indestructible sword chi to gather on his back for protection. Since the ant is bound to die, why does it bother struggling, ha ha ha. Feng Shi, who was proudly standing in the void, couldn't help but smugly laugh, looking at Yang Kai fleeing in panic. Even though taking out the Emperor authority bead would make him short of a powerful trump card and even drain most of his source chi, as long as he could finish Yang Kai off, it was well worth it. Yang Kai had stolen his woman and even made him lose all face in the arena of Ice Moon City, so Feng Shi was already consumed with hatred and wanted to kill him as soon as possible. But, he had never thought that he would encounter Yang Kai so soon after coming to the Shattered Star Sea. This was simply a heaven-sent opportunity. He didn't believe that a third-order Dao Source realm cultivator like Yang Kai could survive under his father's Emperor authority bead. Yang Kai had just displayed his dragon transformation and 5 elements indestructible sword chi secret techniques. Despite both these techniques bolstering his defenses, Yang Kai still felt a tremendous pressure and was on the verge of losing consciousness even before the attack reached him. The moment he was struck, his back seemed to have been ripped open and unbearable pain filled his body. All of his bones were creaking and a sweet taste appeared in his mouth before he spurted a mouthful of blood. Yang Kai didn't even bother to check his injuries and promptly used the local space principles to teleport forward. There was a fine line between life and death. At this moment, the power of the Emperor authority bead had still not played out completely, yet it had put such pressure on him. If all of it had erupted at once, Yang Kai believed that even if he was proficient in the Tao of space, he would not have been able to escape. The thick and dense Emperor pressure was right on his tail and it engulfed the surrounding region, sealing off this part of the void. Yang Kai knew that once he was completely suppressed, it would be next to impossible to escape from here. Hong long long. Violent and continuous explosions coming from behind kept blasting in his ears, and the might of that finger fired from the Emperor authority bead kept following him like a shadow. Yang Kai bit his tongue and madly burned his own blood essence, drastically improving his speed and allowing him to cross thousands of meters in the blink of an eye. Another explosion suddenly reverberated, and the might of the Emperor authority bead seemed to have erupted completely at this moment. A huge black hole had suddenly appeared in the direction Yang Kai had escaped, a chaotic blackness expanding outwards from the crack in space. Feng Xuan's illusory phantom stood still in the void, gazing at the fleeing Yang Kai in the distance, gradually dispersing a moment later. Ha ha ha, not even a shred of left behind. You are still a bit too tender to fight against this young master. Feng Shi was certain Yang Kai had died, so he couldn't help but burst into laughter. However, this laughter had tired his exhausted body even more, causing him to burst into a violent coughing fit. After finally calming down, Feng Shi bitterly glanced in the direction of Black Hole before he turned around and fled in the opposite direction. He had drained almost all of his source chi to activate that Emperor Authority bead, so right now, he urgently had to find a place to restore himself, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to fight off dangers here once he encountered any. The Shattered Star Sea wasn't a stable place, and in the competition to find the inheritance of heaven-devouring Great Emperor, everyone was an enemy. They would try to kill anyone in sight without asking anything. On another side, Yang Kai, who Feng Shi believed to have died, dragged his severely wounded body towards the nearby asteroid sea with great difficulty. At this moment, Yang Kai's eyes were lifeless and his consciousness was hazy. Ever since he had entered the Dao Source realm, he had never suffered such serious injuries.